Hello and welcome back to the Bikini Black podcast, the official podcast of Athena Security Solutions. Here at Athena Security, we provide niche and specialist services using means not openly discussed nor widely known about. Some of these methods we can talk about, some we cannot, and others, well, we'll leave it to you to read between the lines. Operating with a commitment to staying ahead of potential threats, we take a proactive approach to manage and mitigate risk. Why Bikini Black, we hear you ask? Well, Bikini Black was one of 5 alert states used to indicate the level of threat posed by either military or terrorist attack. Bikini was a random code word selected by a computer for the MOD, and the levels of threat were colour-coded. Bikini Black means that there is a possibility of an attack, but no defined target, and could occur anywhere, anytime. In our Bikini Black podcasts, we invite other industry experts, leaders and campaigners to join us as we lift the lid and take you behind the curtain, exposing all with stories and secrets of security pros uncensored. Our guest on this episode has an honorary doctorate, was awarded the Outstanding Contribution Award at the 2020 Counter-Terror Awards, and has been awarded an OBE, amongst many other things. But all of this stems from her life role and her preferred introduction as a mum. It is a huge honour for me to introduce Figen Murray to today's episode. Figen Murray is the mother of Martyn Hett, who was one of the 22 people killed in the Manchester Arena terrorist attack. Figen is now on a mission to create positive change in Martyn's name. She is the driving force behind Martyns Law, a legislation to improve protective security and organisational readiness, and something we strongly endorse here at Athena Security. So, Figen, it's an honour to have you here with us today. Your objectives play such an integral role in our everyday operations here at Athena. We're really grateful to have built such a rapport with you over the years and your quest for Martyn's Law, and we thank you for taking the time to delve a little deeper into your journey with us here today. Mm-hmm. First of all, I have to say a massive well done for your walk, your 200-mile walk. How are you feeling? Have you recovered?
Ish, yeah. So my feet were never the problem. Everybody asks me, how are your feet? They were okay, actually.
I'm surprised.
Very early on I had one blister and my husband dealt with it because he came along.
Yes.
As just not just my support as my husband, but he's the doctor as well. So he was the team doctor. And, you know, he went through a 10-minute ritual every morning to bandage my feet up really tightly.
Aww.
So my feet were never a problem. It was my left hip that was really playing up.
Oh, no.
And I was okay, in pain from halfway through the first week, but it was okay because Stuart gave me loads of strong medication.
Oh.
And then halfway through the second week, sort of 3 days before the end, I started limping and I really worried I might not be able to finish it.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I would have walked with a Zimmer frame or crawled there if I needed to.
I know.
I was determined to get to the end.
You were determined, and
Yeah.
it took you 16 days, didn't it, in total?
Yes. Yeah.
That's quite a walk. But of course, your challenge didn't end there, because you had another small battle when you ended up in Downing Street, didn't you?
Yeah, it was an interesting day, shall we say. It was obviously the 7th anniversary of the attack, which was a difficult day in itself. But the meeting time with Rishi Sunak was changed 3 or 4 times. It was 2:30, 1:30, 1 o'clock, and eventually they settled for 12:45. And had it been delayed to 2 or 3 o'clock, I think, in all honesty, he would have cancelled it because he called the election that afternoon. So, on the other hand, he was in a really difficult situation because he had no choice but to meet me. Can you imagine the headlines had he not met me? Grieving mother walks 200 miles to meet Rishi Sunak and arrives on the day of her son's anniversary of his death, and the Prime Minister refuses to see her.
Yes.
That headline wouldn't have been great, so he had absolutely no choice but to meet me. I'm sure it was the last thing he wanted to do that day.
He called the election around 4 p.m, didn't he?
Yeah. What I'd like to say is I feel the universe was was aligned properly, and it was definitely on our side.
Yes, exactly.
Because had we had the meeting, or had we arrived the day after, nobody would have even mentioned the book. It would have been all for nothing, because election frenzy took over and everybody would have just ignored it.
You mentioned that meeting that day, you felt a little bit misled afterwards. Is that because he called the election so soon after?
No. The media put it differently. They said he lied to me. I don't think he lied to me, because he couldn't completely commit to it. He could have been maybe saying it in a different way. Mm-hmm. What he said to me is, I promise you I will get the legislation introduced into Parliament before summer recess. Now, I know summer recess is 23rd of July.
Yes.
So technically, even if he gets re-elected, he still has time to do so. So I don't feel he lied to me. And he also said that, but he can't promise that the legislation will be done and dusted before the next election. I mean, as the election was called 3 hours later, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Does.
So he could have worded it differently. He could have said maybe something like, well, unfortunately, politically, it's a really difficult period in government, and therefore I can't very sadly give you clear answers, but as soon as I have clarity, I'll contact you, or something like that. But, so I don't feel he lied to me.
Yeah.
Under the circumstances, I think, by default of the situation he was in, he misled me.
Of course. And I know that yesterday there was more press that came out.
Yeah.
Because as the headline said, which I'm sure you're not happy with the terminology of, you confronted him on LBC.
Yeah, that wasn't a confrontation, it's just a question. But you know what the media are like, they hype everything up. I'm not a confrontational person.
No, not at all.
I feel very much that I've merely asked the question, can you give me a timeline? That's all I asked.
Yes.
That's not confrontational. But unfortunately, he couldn't answer the question. I would have liked, ideally, for him to say, well, once government is in operation, we're looking at a period of 3 to 4 months. That would have been okay.
Yeah, a rough timeline.
A rough timeline.
Yeah.
That's all I asked. You see, the thing is, he said to me, it's going to be, he'll prioritise it.
Yes.
And when somebody says to me, I will prioritise, that means he's putting it fairly high up on the agenda. So surely with that in mind, there must be an indication of a timeline.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I know that you refer to your life in 2 parts, before Martyn and after Martyn. Could you tell us a little bit about life before Martyn?
Well, it was very ordinary, busy. I've always been a busy person, but, we had a busy life. Husband, wife, 5 kids, 4 grandkids. That's very busy. We've had kids working, kids getting divorced, kids starting uni, kids doing A-levels. It was pretty hectic family life. And my husband is working full-time. I was working full-time at the time. So life was very full on, but we ploughed through it normal, like any normal family, and that came to a very abrupt halt that night, completely. But as hectic as it was, we all enjoyed life, and that enjoyment stopped.
Oh, that's awful. I have seen a lot of Martyn's social media profiles. I've watched a lot of his YouTube videos. He seems like an amazing person. How would you, in your words, describe Martyn?
How would I describe Martyn? Well, you certainly knew when he was around in a good way. He'd enter the room and the room would suddenly come to life. He was one of those people who was like a people magnet. Everybody focused around him. He could hold an audience. He had an incredibly good sense of humour. He was just so fun to be around. One of his friends once said he could make a 10-minute boring walk to a charity shop the funniest thing ever.
Oh, lot. And I bet you took that with you on that walk that you did for those 200 miles.
We did try and have a few laughs, definitely, yeah.
I'm really sorry to have to ask you this question because I know you're asked this all the time and it must be so terrible for you to recite. But could you tell us what happened on that fateful day, May 2017?
It was a Monday and it was an ordinary working day for all of us. So my youngest daughter was off doing revision. My older daughter, the only two still living at home, my older daughter was in her bedroom preparing artwork for an exhibition the day after. At uni, she was doing an undergraduate course. And I had been working all day that day, and I made the assumption that Martyn was in his flat a mile and a half down the road getting ready for his trip to America, because he said to me the day before, on the Sunday when I met him, he said, "I've not done any packing for my trip. I really need to start getting packing. I've taken Monday and Tuesday off. I'm going to get stuck in and get ready for the trip," because on the Wednesday that week was meant to take him to the airport because he was meant to go on a 2-month trip of a lifetime, backpacking around to North America on his own. And of course that sadly never happened, but that's what I assumed. He's at home. Unbeknown to me, he wasn't. He was out all day celebrating 2 of his friends' birthdays and the trip to America with his friends. So that it was a hot day. They've been drinking all day. And then that evening they went to the concert. He almost didn't go. He last minute swapped his seat with somebody, one of his other friends who was meant to be right over there. And it thus would have exited a totally different exit. But he wanted to sit with a different group of people. So they swapped tickets and so he went to the concert, and during the last few songs, he and one of his friends went to the loo and to get some more wine. And on the way back, 2 girls stopped him to talk about his Deirdre Barlow tattoo on his leg.
Okay.
He was a massive Coronation Street fan, and that was his downfall, very sadly, in the end, because his other friend said, "Oh, I'll go back in." And Martyn said to him jokingly, "I'll just finish talking to my fan club. I'll follow you after."
Oh.
So he chatted with the girls for about 5 minutes. And when he was then trying to go back in, security wouldn't let him back in because the concert had finished and people were about to come out. So he was quite happy with his mobile phone in one, glass of wine in the other, singing on top of his voice, dancing around and messing around. And he was in a really happy place. And unfortunately, when people then started exiting, the bomb went off.
Oh my goodness.
And he was stood about 4 meters away.
How did you find out about this?
So I was fast asleep in bed because I had an early night, because Nikita was revising for her exams. Louise was messing about with artwork on her floor. My husband Stuart was doing paperwork downstairs. Nobody really needed me. Nobody had time to watch TV with me or do anything else. So I thought, just get to bed. So I went to bed early and must have fallen asleep straight away. The next thing I knew is Louise, my 19-year-old, woke me up. Not deliberately, but I became aware somebody was in the room. And when I opened my eyes, she had my mobile phone in her hand. So I said, "What are you doing with my phone?" And she said, "I'm sorry, didn't mean to wake you. I just wanted to check if Martyn tried to phone you or text you."
Yeah.
Because his friends keep ringing me and texting me. So by that time I was wide awake, of course, and I said, "Well, where is he? Is he not at home?" And she said, "No, they've been to a gig at the arena and there's been an incident." So I said, "What do you mean by incidents?" And she said, "Mum, there's been an explosion." And with that, I jumped out of bed and ran downstairs. And she followed me. I don't know why I needed to run downstairs, but I felt the need.
Yeah.
And my husband was just about himself to come to bed. So he was stood by the TV watching the news flash with people running and screaming. And I pointed at the TV saying, "Martyn is there and his mates are all out, but they can't find him." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about Martyn. You know what he's like. He always leaves concerts early. He'll be in the gay village ordering drinks for his mates." like he always does, and I'm not even allowing my brain to go down the why didn't he that day, or if only he had, because that's not healthy, and it doesn't bring him back. So and it's such a damaging thought. So but he said, look, he'll be out of juice on his phone, he'll load his phone in the night, and you'll ring tomorrow, you'll speak tomorrow, and you'll have a good laugh about it. Anyway, I'm off to bed, I'm going to bed. And he went to bed. And Louise and I stayed up and obviously carried on communicating with his mates. Some of them spoke to me in tears on the phone. They were obviously quite traumatized. I could hear sirens in the background. It must have been really dreadful for them. And so the explosion happened 22:31. Probably about 16, 17 minutes past 11. I had this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. I physically went, oh, and Louise said, what's the matter? And I said, I don't know, Louise, I just have this weird feeling suddenly. I can't sense him anymore. And I said, it's like there's nothingness. In fact, it feels like he's not even on the planet anymore.
Oh, wow.
And then I looked at her and I said, your brother's dead. And she burst out crying. She said, don't say that, Mum. And I said, look, this is such a strong feeling. There's literally absolutely nothing, no connection whatsoever. I'm telling you, he's dead. And unfortunately, 24 hours later, that was confirmed.
Yeah.
So, I knew then it had happened.
Mother's instinct.
I don't know what it was, but it was such a strong feeling. You see, the thing is, I had a really close connection to Martyn out of all of my 5 kids. Not because I have a favourite child. As a mum, you don't do that. But the connection was there because he was my problem child. There was always an issue I had to deal with. He always came to me to kind of rescue him out of yet another disaster.
Yeah.
Be that a blind date in Rome and his wallet gets stolen, or be that I don't know, him falling asleep in the middle of the night on a train and ending up somewhere and having no money. It's like there was always an issue.
Always a story to tell.
Yeah. And he lived in London. He couldn't pay his rent sometimes. Please, Mum, send me £200. I promise you I'll pay it back. I can't even tell you how many thousands of pounds he owed me, and he never paid back.
It's amazing. Well, I heard as well somewhere, and you'll describe it a lot better than me, that he'd always said that he was going to go in a fabulous way.
Yeah. Well, actually, what he did say is he always knew he always said, I'm not going to see my 30th birthday. And he died when he was 29 and a half. His birthday would have been in the December. He always said he's going to die a spectacular death. And that sadly both came true. And after he died, obviously, I'm 63, I haven't even thought, even now, of my own funeral. I haven't had time to think about it. I have no plans for my own funeral, never mind planning my child's funeral. So I had no arrangements whatsoever in my mind, and I didn't know what kind of funeral he'd want. Cremation, burial, what we should do, I had no idea.
Yeah.
But it happened to be one day we discussed it soon after he died. One of his ex-partners was in our house, because they were all really close friends still. And he said, oh, Figen, you don't need to worry about it. He's got it all on his laptop. It's all written down. And we found his instructions to the finest detail. He wanted 2 white horses. He was gay. He wanted to go out like a diva.
Of course.
Yeah. So he wanted 2 white horses and a white coach. And he wanted everyone to be dressed in black with something fabulous. So we had feather boas and rainbow-coloured trainers and ties and goodness knows what. He wanted to be cremated. That was the biggest important decision. He also had 2 playlists, and I mentioned his sense of humour earlier. He had the funeral playlist, and the other one was Don't You Dare Play These.
And one of them was Mariah Carey, wasn't it? Was it Hero?
This Hero song is one that he didn't like, but he absolutely worshipped Mariah.
Okay.
In fact, she spoke at his funeral over satellite.
Oh, wow.
At the very end, you can still watch it on YouTube, his funeral. And we had the coffin was decorated with his favourite divas, actresses and singers, and the coffin lid was a full-size Mariah Carey.
That's amazing.
And in fact, Helen Worth, who plays Gail Platt in the soap Coronation Street that obviously he worshipped, I spotted her at the funeral, and I had to walk over and say, "It's very kind of you to come. However, I need to warn you, your face is on his coffin." So she took it with grace.
I was going to say, I don't think that's
quite touched.
That's something you don't hear every day, is it?
No. So he had lots of female singers and actresses
Yeah.
all around his coffin.
Oh, I think he'd be so happy with that.
I think we gave him a funeral that would have pleased him. Yeah.
Definitely. That sounds absolutely incredible. You chose to forgive the terrorist, didn't you? Which I know it caused quite a stir.
Yeah. Well, the way that came about is obviously as soon as it happened, we didn't watch the news anymore because I didn't want the rest of my children to get upset. I didn't want to hear it. But it was all over the news, so we had no radio or TV on. However, my husband kept going and buying, unbeknown to me. I didn't realize who did it, but I found out my husband was every day going across to the shop and buying newspapers and piling them on the dining room table. And on day 3 after the attack, I happened to walk past the table and I saw this young man at the front with Arena bomber, and I went, "Oh my God." And I looked at the picture, and then I read that he was only 22 years old. And I thought, how can you do this at such a young age? How can you understand, even comprehend what you have done at that age? You don't understand the world at that age. And I couldn't believe how young he was, honestly. It really shocked me. And then I forgot about that. But just under 3 weeks later, in fact, it's the anniversary of it this week, it was the Finsbury mosque attack where one person died. And I hadn't watched the news or anything, but I found myself, the day after the mosque attack was the first day I was on my own at home. Nikita went to school, Louise went to uni or some friends. My husband went to work, all my relatives had left the house, and the police stopped coming. So it was literally the first morning on my own. And I thought, do some normal stuff. So I went across, bought a newspaper and made myself some breakfast and coffee. And I sat at the kitchen island, opened the paper up to the front page, and in the center was this picture of 5 men interlinking arms and a guy on the floor. And I thought, oh, what's that? And it was the Finsbury attack, and it appeared that one of the 5 men was the imam, and the other 4 were people who'd been at the mosque that day. And in all that chaos and terrorizing moment, these 5 men decided within split seconds to link arms and protect the guy, because obviously he hit some people with his vehicle, killed a man, and he hit something and couldn't drive further, so he tried to run away but tripped and fell on the floor. In the meantime, the people from the mosque were chasing him, and the imam and these 4 guys protected him, and the imam said that you're not to touch this guy, he'll be punished in the proper way. It's not up to us. And I thought about this picture and I thought, oh my God, how can these people instinctively do the right thing? And then I thought about the picture of day 3 of the young man. And somehow in my head that day, I didn't do anything other than think about this. The 2 pictures came together for me and I thought, well, yeah. And then I decided to look at the bigger picture and think a bit further. And, you know, when you look at the big picture, this young man to me, I looked that far back that I saw him as a naked baby, newborn. And I thought, no, you were born innocent. terrorists are not born as terrorists. Somebody poisoned your mind along your life.
Yes.
And therefore I can forgive you. You are just a tool that some bigger person, bigger entity is using. So I saw him as a victim as well. I know it sounds controversial, but I indeed did see him as a victim, just as somebody who can be thrown away, not important enough. And do I have compassion for him? That's probably a step too far. But I certainly understood that it wouldn't be fair for me to be angry with him, although he killed my son and loads of other people. And I get why people get angry, but I chose not to be. I didn't feel it was the right thing for me. I went the opposite. And also for me, I heard randomly in passing the lounge, the news happened to be on. And I heard on the local news that Islamophobia had gone up by 300%, and that worried me. And then I thought it was all happening in that one day when I was on my own, processing all of this. And then I thought, well, I, as the mother of somebody who died at the arena, maybe I can do something to break the cycle of hate. Maybe I can publicly forgive this guy on national TV.
Yes.
And it might just make a tiny difference. And those are the reasons why I forgave. The other reasons, of course, are personal, because I didn't feel it was right for me to be angry, because my kids had already lost their brother. Had I entered the realms of anger and hate and bitterness, they would have lost me as well. And I couldn't let that happen. Yeah. So forgiveness was for me as much as for him.
Do you think you've drawn a lot of that ability from your background as a life coach counsellor? Yeah. You
see, I'm not religious, but I do believe that the universe actually made me train as a therapist 30 years ago, not to help others, but to prepare me for what was to come for me later.
Everything was aligned for a reason, hasn't it? Totally.
Yeah. So I feel without that, I would not have been able to look at the bigger picture. Without that, I wouldn't have been as calm as I am and as measured as I am.
Yeah, totally. So most people would, in that situation, even if we did have a moment of understanding, the anger, I think, would inevitably kind of level that out. But for you,
I've never been angry.
Let it win.
There isn't a split second where I was angry. In fact, I went to my GP because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep at all. So I had a few sleeping tablets in the house for some reason. Only 2 or 3 I took then, but then I ran out. And I thought, I need to sleep because I can't function. So I made an appointment at the doctor's, and the doctor said, obviously I know what's happened to you. I need to ask you. He put his pen and paper down, turned completely to me and said, I need to ask you, tell me straight, are you suicidal? And I looked at him saying, suicidal? Why would I be suicidal? Well, given the circumstance, okay, so do you need antidepressants? Shall I prescribe you some? And I said, I'm not depressed. And he said, you must be. And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, he looked confused. He said, you must have some emotion. And I said, yeah, I do have emotion. But the only emotion I have is sadness. And that's remained till today, 7 years on. Yeah. That's the only emotion I have about it. No bitterness, no anger, no regret, no what ifs, no if onlys, because it's all not useful.
You've kind of already touched upon this a little bit, but what spurred you to actually start the Protect Duty Martyns Law?
Yeah, so the first 12 months we didn't do anything. I obviously lost my job. I couldn't carry on with my job. After Martyn died, that was my last working day that day. But in the first year, my youngest daughter bought my husband some concert tickets for a singer he likes as a Father's Day gift in the June, but the concert wasn't until first week in December that year in 2018. So December came, it was 18 months after the attack, and it was more or less the first time I ventured back into Manchester for a social occasion. So I remember getting ready and taking my tiniest handbag. All I needed was my phone and some tissues. And I thought that would make the bag search easy, because naively I thought, particularly in Manchester, since the attack, security will be top notch everywhere. And it's a fair assumption to make. We got there, my husband gets his tickets out of his wallet, we walked in, staff were looking at us, and then they turned away again and carried on talking. Nobody checked our entrance tickets, never mind any bag search. So he said, we need to go upstairs. So we walked up the stairs, nobody queried it. We sat down and that was it. And during the concert, Stuart suddenly noticed I wasn't just crying, I was sobbing. But he couldn't hear me cry. He just saw me having floods of tears. So he whispered, "It's the songs, isn't it?" And I whispered back saying, "I'm not even listening to the bloody songs." And he looked confused and he whispered, "Why are you crying then?" And I whispered back saying, "Because nobody searched my bags." I was really, really upset about that. And to me, what that did is I thought, how can that be? 18 months after 22 people died, a lot of them children. How can you all forget so quickly that these people are dead? How can you do that?
Yeah.
I was completely confused about that and upset. And after Christmas, during the Christmas period, I started researching, because that was long before my master's started. But I was starting to research security at venues and came across the government's contest document, because at that point I was still completely a layperson, didn't know anything about security or terrorism, and looked through this document, and there it was: venue security is optional, it's a recommendation only. And it's astonishingly, that's still the case till today, with all the terrorist activities that have been around.
Yeah.
That just surprises me. But there is no security legislation, and that is when, that was December. In the January then I started a 6-month petition online, and my petition crawled up to 23,500 signatures by the end of the 6 months, when it automatically stops. And 2 other ones happened on the same site and overtook mine by the hundreds of thousands in 2-3 weeks. And one was Bring Back the Jeremy Kyle Show, and the other one was Bring Back Plastic Straws for McDonald's. Now I have tried sucking up milkshake with a paper straw, and my husband took a photo of me. It can be done, you just need to be a bit patient.
Or you pick up a spare.
Or you lift the lid and drink it.
There you go.
So, but the public is the public. So they were more successful petitions than mine. But in the same period, Brendan Cox phoned me. I didn't know who he was at first, but he said, "I've seen your petition. This is what happened to my wife last year, the year before Martyn died. I believe in what you're doing is the right thing. I can help you if you want. I'd like to sit you in front of a security minister. But before we do that, I need to get something in writing. So we need a white paper. And I know just the person who can put that on paper. I need to introduce you to him." So he introduced me to Nick Aldworth, who was at the time the national coordinator for Protect and Prepare at Scotland Yard. So off I went to meet him. He said, "It's great. We've been trying to get the government to get legislation out there for ages, but they're not listening to us. However," he said, "I can't help you now. I'm working here and it's a conflict of interest." He must have seen my disappointment, because he then said, "However, I retire in May, and as soon as I retire, I'll jump on board." He retired in May, the day after he phoned me and said, I'm on to it.
Amazing.
So he got the paper together, and then in the September, I think early September that year, we met the first of 6 security ministers. Brandon Lewis, who was in the he was the security minister. And we met him with his entourage and had the meeting, presented Martyns Law, and that was how the whole thing started.
obviously you did your master's degree in counter-terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
Did you learn anything in that made you change the legislation at all? Was there anything that,
No, I
changed?
learned a lot, obviously, during the course, much more than I had questions that I needed answering. So I'm far more knowledgeable now, but what it did help me understand is how important the legislation is, and that actually the government is irresponsible by not introducing it. I shouldn't even have to campaign, to be honest. I honestly shouldn't have to campaign. British citizens, or the citizens in this country, have a right to be kept safe, and I can't believe there's legislation for how many toilets there have to be, that you don't sell food past the sell-by date at venues, yet there is nothing about security.
Yeah.
There's no law about it.
I think the majority of the population, if they were aware of that, would be totally shocked.
But this is it, they're not aware of it, and that's
aware.
the problem. And I obviously before Martyn died, I was totally oblivious to security. It wasn't relevant to me. It wasn't on my radar. You see security cameras, you think that's security. You see people in high-vis jackets, you think that's security. Didn't even occur to me that some of these people may be trained haphazardly or not at all, that they're not security but they're stewards and it's not their remit, that some of the cameras may be outdated or not working, not switched on, that there might be blind spots. Didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
I just made the assumption that it's dealt with.
Absolutely. How do you balance raising awareness without instilling fear into the public?
Yeah, so when I initially started the campaign and I put it out on Twitter for the first time, I was accused of two things. One was, you're going to make people bankrupt because of Martyns Law, venues will close down, businesses will close down. And the other criticism was, you're going to scare the nation. So in my dissertation, I addressed both issues. So in terms of the fear, I did some research during my dissertation that was carried out in different European countries, where some people were given instructions of what to do in a terrorist attack and what not to do. Others were given no instructions. And the outcome was, obviously played out scenarios that the people who didn't have any knowledge were panicking, were running around like headless chickens, didn't know what to do and what not to do. Whereas the other group who had that knowledge, they were calm, they followed orders and instructions. They were more inclined to follow the guidance of security staff and police once they were confronted. And they knew where to hide and what not to do.
The run, hide, test.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which
yes,
should really ring off, it should ring off everyone's lips, but it doesn't as much as some of the other slogans that you hear. See it, say it, sorted, those sort of things. It should be as natural to people.
Yeah.
I see you still regularly share videos. You shared one the other week.
About the cafe.
The cafe, yeah.
Yes.
So things like that, I don't think videos like that are instilling fear in people.
No.
But they need to be out there more often. You don't.
It's knowledge, isn't it? And knowledge is power, and knowledge empowers. And I think, certainly the research I found is saying the opposite. And funny enough, the government's own think tank, RUSI, there are a few people there. It's all very academic research. There's a few people there researching the same thing. And I spoke to some of them, and they're coming up with the same results as I did.
Ah, okay.
So there you go.
Oh, well, I hope it will become, a little bit more spoken about, especially after the law is finalised. Obviously, here at the security company, we're very aware of Martyn's Law, but for anyone who doesn't know, could you talk us through the key elements?
Yeah, Martyn's Law is really not difficult. It's a very simple, straightforward concept. We are asking people to train their staff in the free of charge ACT e-learning training, 45 minutes online. We are asking, and I also additionally recommend something that I found even more important, and that's the 15-minute scan for all staff video. it's really informing you about hostile reconnaissance, and that can really engage the general public by noticing unsavory behavior. But basically, so we're asking for training your staff in that very basic ACT e-learning training. We are asking people to do a risk assessment of their premises inside and outside.
Mm-hmm.
Anything they identify, deal with the problem, deal with the issue. Number 4 is that we're asking people to have a counter-terrorism action plan, and everybody from the cleaning person to the CEO should know what to do in case of an attack, where to evacuate, where to evacuate if need be. And that finally, for the bigger venues, that the local authorities are working with the venue. And that's it in a nutshell, really.
Yeah.
And as for the evacuation, in Borough Market, people had to evacuate in lots of the pubs, the hidden basements, and some of them for many hours. So I always say that if you have an evac room identified, make sure you have first aid kits, make sure you have, mobile phone chargers, make sure you have non-perishable food like crisps or cereal bars, bottled water, but also most importantly have a bucket ready and a screen, because when you're in a terrifying situation, your body goes into a fight or flight mode, and the flight mode makes, the primitive instinct we have. If we are frightened to death, we feel we want to run, but of course you can't run. However, the body still thinks it needs to prepare to run, which means it eliminates everything you don't need in your body.
Yeah.
So people may need the loo because of purely by being terrified, and you need to have that facility available for people.
So you need to have all that prepared.
It sounds crude, but it's
those things that are important, because if you do end up in that situation, hindsight's a wonderful thing. We should have had this, we should have done that, should have prepared.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Because you can't just go out to check if they've gone. You need to wait until somebody actually comes and finds you.
That is
so
terrifying.
It can be long.
Really,
yeah,
that really
exactly.
is terrifying. The ACT e-learning course you mentioned, we've all redone it recently because it changed in May, didn't it?
Yeah.
So are you kind of pushing for people to stay on top of the training as well and making that compulsory?
I need to do it myself again, because I did mine 2-3 years ago, and I keep saying I need to do it, but I need to really do it. And during the summer period when my life is a little bit quieter, I will be doing it. But yeah, so it's free of charge. It's so easy to do, and it's so valuable. And I really feel, I personally think it should be done in schools, even not in secondary schools, before school people leave school, so that if just imagine a world where everybody did this training before they left school and they are starting adulthood with that knowledge already.
Yeah,
it'll be more normalized that you're just more careful.
Should be like basic first aid, really, shouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And again, that life-saving training. Again, I carry a gadget in my handbag all the time that I can turn into a makeshift tourniquet. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
we've all got the medical kits we carry around with us as well, and it's so important to have that.
Yeah.
I think you see all these videos that have come out recently of people having their phone snatched because they're just in their own world all the time. I think people need to have an awareness, and doing that training makes you more aware.
Exactly.
And especially if you come into the security industry, it makes you even more aware.
I did all that training, and to be honest with you, not because I'm paranoid, but because I've done all that training and I'm more security aware now. When I go to a restaurant or cafe, I always look for the back door. I never sit with my back to the door. I always want to see who comes in.
Yes.
I do it automatically now. I would never sit in a street cafe unless I'm absolutely certain a vehicle can't mount the pavement. And then I'll sit down, So I'm far more, for me it's second nature now. But a lot of people, most people, are totally unaware of all of this.
Yeah.
And I just want people need to appreciate that the police and counter-terrorism and the government cannot keep us all safe. There's just not enough capacity. security is everybody's business. We all need to become more security savvy, because we know that terrorists get recruited online, and they learn what to do online, and then they can go out and attack anytime, anywhere, any place. So we all need to know that, have that knowledge.
Have an awareness.
Yeah,
absolutely. So now at the time of recording, I know it's really kind of crunch time at the moment. What is the current status of Martyns Law?
So obviously we did, on 7th of May, we started the walk, which I didn't think I'd ever have to do. I mentioned it to Brendan about 4 years ago. I said, him and I went to a meeting at the Home Office. That didn't go too well. And I was sort of talking to him outside the Home Office. And I said, you know what? If they don't do it, I'll bloody well walk to Manchester, to London from Manchester. And he said then, don't be daft, you don't need to do that. And then in January, early January, he phoned me and he said, you know that walk you mentioned, I think you ought to do it. So I started then practicing it with my husband from the end of January. In fact, mid-January, we went on holiday and we walked 10 kilometres along a beach and walked back, so that was, and from then on, every weekend we trained until May, when the walk started on 7th of May, and we ended up arriving on the 7th anniversary of the attack at number 10. And we met with Rishi Sunak, and we met Keir Starmer, and he promised to introduce the legislation in that meeting before summer recess. Obviously, we didn't know, but he did. He knew, but we didn't know that 3 hours after that meeting, he's going to call the general election. He had no choice but to meet, because had he not met me, the headline would have been, grieving mother walked 200 miles to meet the Prime Minister, arriving on the 7th anniversary of her child's death, and the Prime Minister didn't meet her. That's a headline that wouldn't have been very welcome. So he had no choice but to meet me that day. But I'm sure it's the very last thing he wanted to do. So he met, and he did say in that meeting, and of course, the other thing people don't appreciate, often you see the Prime Minister in this nice room with families or people, general public. What the general public don't know is that at the end of the room, there's about 20 cameras pointing at you, and journalists, who are very quiet because they want to hear what's being said. So he said, I promise you I'll introduce it into Parliament before summer recess. Now I know summer recess is 23rd of July. And I said, you promise? And he said, yes, I promise. So I reached out my hand, but I clocked, because of my previous training, that split-second hesitation. He looked horrified at my hand, and I thought, should I not have done that? But then he took it and said, yes, I promise, I will introduce it before summer recess. But I can't guarantee that it'll all be done and dusted before the next election.
Yeah.
Obviously. So then we met James Cleverley, who explained to us why Martyns Law does not qualify for wash-up, which is a process where legislation that's not been dealt with yet just gets pushed through without any further debate and discussion. And he explained that the law hasn't reached high up enough stages in both houses to qualify for it, because it was misrepresented in the media that it's failed wash-up. It hasn't failed it. It never qualified for it. So wash-up wasn't a possibility either. But after that, James Cleverley, we met Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer did it differently. He grabbed myself and my husband and pulled us into a little side room, just the three of us. And he said to me, first of all, my condolences. And then he looked at me, he said, look, this is not politician talk. He said, if I get elected, what you're doing is a no-brainer. It needs to happen. I'm not sure why you're still having to do it. It should have happened by now. He said, if I get elected, I will absolutely prioritize it very high up on my list. And although you should never trust a politician, something in me believes him. I don't know why, but I do. And funny enough, my 2 youngest daughters were with me when we met all of these people. And my youngest, she's 23, she said to me afterwards, the meeting with Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly felt more like a business interaction. When we met Keir Starmer and his staff, it was human to human. And that really, she really said it as it is. It had a completely different feeling.
Yeah, I saw a video of him. It might, I don't know, you tell me whether it was on the same day or not. He's in an orange high-vis, or there's people around him in high-vis jackets doing something, and he seems to talk quite passionately about it. He seems to have an understanding that...
Yeah. You see, the media, often people say to about Keir Starmer, he's boring, he's robotic, he's got no personality. I don't want somebody who is a showman. I want somebody who's a normal person who understands what we as the general public need.
Yes.
I don't care if they're boring. But you know what? I've met him twice now, and I don't think at all he was boring or robotic. He was relatable. He related. And that to me is very important.
And you want someone that can walk the walk, not talk the talk for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, well, hopefully everything will come along quite quickly. I know they do obviously say there's a lot to it. There's a lot to be put in place, of course. Yeah. It's a huge law, but it's so vital.
Yeah, but on the other hand, we've already had 2 public consultations. There have already been amendments. It's been through the Home Affairs Select Committee. I mean, how much more preparation does it need?
Yeah.
And
I know, well, us as one security company, but I've seen others talking about it increasingly more, obviously, as time's gone on. We're all ready.
Exactly. The industry is ready.
We are ready.
It's just the government who need to get their act together and get it out there.
Absolutely.
So, but we also had the very last meeting that day was with Yvette Cooper. And she said to me, if we get in as Labour, we obviously have lots of exciting things we want to do. And we need to put that into practice. However, as you know, Figen, nothing happens quick in government. So no matter how excited we are about all our plans, if we get in, what we have to do is we have to put it all in writing. We have to have processes in place that will take about 6 months before anything happens. No matter how exciting it is, nothing will happen quickly. However, your draft bill is ready, and in that first 6 months when nothing much is going to happen, that is the time we can put it through.
But what about the potential backlash if something was to happen in the interim?
How do you mean?
If something happened while it's all being processed, there would be so many people talking. It should have been pushed through. Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. This is the frustrating thing, because we know that there have been 14 successful terrorist attacks since 2017, 5 of them alone in 2017. And since 2017, we've had in the region of 43, 44 near misses, attacks that were just about stopped on time. In the Streatham attack, 53 seconds it took for the police to stop it. Just about. But to me, the law, while they're getting really good at stopping or foiling attacks, the law of averages tells me sooner or later we're not going to be able to stop one, and one of them is going to be successful. I don't want to be the person who says, I told you so, but guess what I'll be doing if that happens? Yeah. I will say, I told you so. And it won't make me very happy to have to do that. But, the threat is real. We've got so much global unrest at the moment with the Gaza conflict, with the Ukraine war. Putin met that guy from Korea yesterday, so they've signed a contract to support each other. Who knows what that's going to entail if something happens. So the world is really in a lot of unrest, and and I know that these extremist groups use any conflict for their advantage to try and recruit more people.
Yeah.
So if anything, this is all going to increase, not decrease.
Yeah.
And therein lies the danger. So this law is urgently needed, and I wish the government would see it.
Yeah, so do I. So do we. So you do educational talks, don't you? What do they involve?
So I have probably, I need to do the latest tally, probably I'm now at 28,000 kids, probably slightly more actually. I know by the end of this year it'll be 30,000 because I'm going to a school in Hull, and usually when I go there it's about 2,000 kids I speak to, because they ship me in the day before, and I see all the kids that day.
Oh wow.
I'm there all day. And basically my talk is in 3 stages. So the first one is obviously I talk to the young people about what happened, and then the second section is about values, because I feel one of the problems we have in globally is the lack of values. We don't respect each other, we are frightened of each other, we don't have this tolerance, and we have too much fear inside of us of difference.
Mm-hmm.
And and I always say to young people, there's one slide I have which is very colourful, and it's by a philosopher called Martin Hett, who's sadly dead, but he had this saying: if we all did one random act of kindness daily, we may just set the world in the right direction. Now, I always do an act of kindness every day, no matter how little, and I have been doing that since the age of 4.
Oh wow.
And it's really important to me, and it can be as little as not standing on an ant that you nearly crushed, or making a cup of tea, or tell the kids tidy your bedroom without being told, empty the dishwasher, take the rubbish out, make your parent or carer a cup of tea randomly without being asked. And it can be anything: smile at somebody, open the door, whatever, and these values are really important. So I talk to them about Ubuntu. I don't know if you know what Ubuntu means.
I've heard you mention it.
Yeah.
But if you could
So
explain.
I show the children some slides of planks of wood, and eventually it's a boat, a very colourful boat. One side of the boat is called #BeMoreMartyn, and the other side is Ubuntu. And I, for a long time, didn't know what Ubuntu is until somebody from Africa explained it to me. And he basically, the boat came about because there was a #BeMoreMartyn going round soon after Martyn died, basically saying, live your life like Martyn did, 100 miles an hour, don't wait, because you may not get the chance. So a lot of people contacted me saying, this is what I've done, I'm being more Martyn. And this one woman contacted me from the Gambia, and she said, I've fulfilled my lifelong dream. After I've seen the #BeMoreMartyn, I gave up my job in the UK and I've come to the Gambia to live and work here. And I want you to know I commissioned a boat in your son's name.
Aww.
And so I thought that was really touching, very kind of her. She's a medical scientist in the Gambia now. And when I met this African guy, he said to me, oh my God, that's so powerful. He said, Ubuntu means I am because you are. It means community spirit. It means tolerance, kindness, peace, love, everything, compassion, empathy. It's a word that encapsulates all of that.
Wow.
And when we moved house after Martyn died, unbeknown to us, we moved into a very posh street in this little village. And on that street, every house has a name. Ours was just number 30. And we kept waiting to find a name. But I wanted a name that encapsulates my value base. As soon as the guy explained what it is, I looked at my husband and I said, we found the name for our house. We're going to call it Ubuntu, and that's what we've legally done now. It's legally called Ubuntu. Well, I also have a slide with the globe and lots of children's hands of different colours holding the globe up, and I say to them, you literally have the future of the world in your hands. You can decide what kind of future you want. but we need those values back. You need to be kind, you need to be tolerant, don't fear difference, embrace it as an enrichment to your own life. And then, so after I talk about values, when I have younger kids, year 7s and 8s, I have pledge cards, very colourful ones, where they can write, my act of kindness is, and they can write something that they commit to.
Aww.
And I have a box and I put it all in the box and then give it to the teacher saying, there you are, there's a whole box of kindness, of values, do something with it. And they often report back to me what they've done with the project.
Oh, that's nice.
That's good. So, but the main reason why I'm obviously at schools is to explain to children that there's dangerous people online and how they can spot them. I talk to them about the tricks these people use to get their trust and what to be careful of, and also how they can recognize signs of being radicalized on themselves or their friends and what to do about it.
Yes.
So, and that to me is a really important aspect of the work I do.
I know a lot of the kids are very inspired by talking to you, and a lot of them, you said, come up and give you a hug afterwards, don't they, and say thank you. And
funny enough, in the school where Hashim and Salman Abedi were, I went in once. I've just been last week again because they keep asking me to go back there. But last year I was at that school talking to year 7 groups. They were the tiny ones. And there was one very small, petite kind of boy. And as I was talking to the head teacher after the talk, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this fast-moving thing approaching me. And when I looked, it was this little boy running towards me. And the head teacher was a bit, oh my God, what's happening? And this boy grabbed hold, he didn't even ask, he just grabbed hold of me and really put his head into me.
oh,
And he really held me tight and he said, thank you so much. And I'm sorry for your loss. And then he ran off.
oh, that's really sweet.
That was so heartwarming.
He probably really had to,
Yeah, he was so
have the nerves up to do that.
But yeah, often young people come up to me and say, do you mind if I have a hug? And and in some schools, I remember one little girl, she stayed behind and I went up to her, said, are you all right? And she said, yeah, my little sister died 2 years ago. Can you give me hints about how to deal with it? So I told the school and they arranged for some therapy for her. She hadn't told anyone and the parents didn't tell,
no, she just sat there holding that herself.
She was a tiny little baby sister who died, or toddler.
Maybe she didn't realise until you spoke that there was really a way of dealing with it, until you were so open with her and you've opened her eyes up to
So I
that.
said, well, I talk to Martyn all the time. Have you thought of writing your little sister a letter that you never sent, but it'll make you feel better, but she got counselling anyway.
Oh, that's so good. Have any of the kids ever approached you afterwards and asked?
Yes.
Yeah?
So I had various things happen. Sometimes people approach me directly, students, whether that's university students or secondary school children. They email me or contact me via Instagram or whatever, messenger. And I've had one parent on Twitter. I went to a grammar school and one parent put on Twitter, my son never talks to me about school. He came home last night telling me all about your talk. Thank you so much.
Oh.
And again, that was success. So yeah, it's good. But my day of feeling really good about the school talks would be if a school rings me or emails me afterwards saying, after your talk, a student approached us for help because they think they're being radicalized. But what is really shocking is when I talk to students, when I say, have you come across anything that you feel has to do with terrorism that you shouldn't have seen, and you stumbled across beheadings, they've seen beheadings, they've seen active shooting, people being shot dead. One boy, he was 11 years old, year 7. He switched on his computer, clicked on something, was chuffed that he thought he's watching an 18+ computer game. but it was the Christchurch shooting live streamed.
Oh no!
And when he realised people are really being killed, he screamed and ran out, and he was really disturbed and had to have some medical psychological help.
Oh my goodness!
So and once you see that, you can't unsee it. You know, so and I say to the children, you can stumble across it even doing your homework. It's all to do with your algorithm, so you need to be really careful.
Yeah, the internet shows you things, and even if it sort of draws some intrigue, it can soon send you down a rabbit hole of other things, and it's so easy to slip into that. Absolutely. Yeah. Does anyone ever ask you if they could maybe get into counter-terrorism or security or policing?
Nobody has said that as the children. They're all just listening, and I get feedback from schools, but nobody necessarily has said that so far.
Okay, I'm quite surprised at that. I thought it might inspire them to want to sort of work on the flip side of it and to try and counteract it, but maybe not.
No, but what I have noticed is some of the survivors of the attack have now done the same course that I have done years later, or have gone into policing, which is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're talking about starting workshops in schools at Athena for a variety of things, and we're thinking of doing it in 3 parts. Yeah. And one will be surveillance, so they learn a little bit about that. Obviously, a lot of our work here is surveillance detection, which I know you're a big fan of. Yeah. So we'd want to teach the kids how to do that, maybe a little bit of close protection, and maybe a bit on the theory sides of open source intelligence and things like that. So hopefully that will inspire some people.
That pleases me to hear, because I think there are not enough things taught at schools about this sort of thing. And that links what you're actually trying to do with schools, links into what I said earlier about we need to, as a general public, be more knowledgeable about security. And if children learn it at that age, that's wonderful.
And naturally, children sort of think, if you say security, they picture someone stood in the Tesco doorway or a bouncer or something like that. And we were talking about this on the podcast last week with Lee. Well, we recorded last week. It won't be launched a week apart, but we were talking about how the idea of security is so small in comparison to what it actually entails. Yeah. We do so much here, so niche, a lot that we can't talk about.
Sure.
But there's so much to it that really, if you stop and explain it to someone, they go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. Surveillance detection, for example, is something that people go, well, what's that? You mean you watch CCTV cameras? No, not at all. Yeah. There's a lot more to it than that, you know? Yeah. And I think if people knew...
It's a fascinating industry. Do you know, if I was 20 years younger, I'd try and get a job in it myself. To be honest, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
But actually, you know, young people, even if somebody is interested in fashion design, they can actually later on be involved in designing security, uniforms and whatever, you know, and there's all sorts of things. If they're interested in, I don't know, photography, they can get involved in the CCTV industry.
Absolutely.
There's different areas, isn't there?
Yeah, so much so. Covert photography, covert surveillance, long lens cameras. There's so much to it that you need to be good at.
But I think young people don't know that. In fact, adults don't know that often. So if you can inspire young people to get into that industry, I also think the industry needs more young people who are au fait with technology and, you know, because certainly at my age I wouldn't be that good with technology, but these young people are growing up with it. For them it's second nature, so I think that's really interesting. We need to inject more young people.
Especially for the intelligence side beforehand.
Absolutely.
And also, in terms of, I keep mentioning surveillance detection, but it links in so much to what you're talking about. A lot of people in the security industry are ex-military, ex-police. They're from a particular generation with a particular background. So they might pick someone up as acting out unusually or think they're doing something slightly strange, whereas someone younger can look at them and go, oh no, actually, they're doing this. This is normal. You're going to see more people doing this. Don't worry about that. Or it's a totally fresh perspective on maybe why someone's acting the way they are. And we have such a diverse team here of people with so many different backgrounds. And it's amazing the different people we pick up because of it.
Yeah, I was recently at a conference and there was a woman talking from the security sector. And she said something that I hadn't considered myself. she said we need more women in the industry because women can detect unusual behavior in other women, whereas men may not notice that.
Yes, absolutely.
And that was interesting.
That's very true. I've never thought. Yeah, I'm going to have to mention that when I get back into the office afterwards.
But actually, it is true.
Yeah, as a female, a male in the industry might not want to watch a female to see how she's behaving because he'd feel a bit odd doing so.
Yeah.
So it's good.
So
to
there's
put
many
one in
reasons
there
why why we need more women, more young people in the industry.
Yeah, totally agree. So
hopefully talking me as if I'm in the industry.
Oh, you've done plenty with regards to the industry, that's for sure. So hopefully working within the schools alongside with what you're doing as well. Hopefully the awareness.
I love the fact that you're going to talk to schools. It's so important.
Oh, thank you.
And make that career really appealing to them. It's great.
Show them the other aspects that you don't see day to day. Yeah, totally.
I mean, today there was somebody who was teaching security with virtual reality, and again, he was a young bloke. He's got a company in somewhere in Shropshire, and they're working with security companies, training staff with VR technology.
Oh.
Fascinating.
Oh, that's interesting.
And young people in that, who want to get involved in the industry, that would be right up their street to develop that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Might have to take their details from you afterwards. Is there anything in particular you'd like to see more of in the industry as a whole, or is there a gap for something new?
I think training is a big issue for me. To me, knowledge is power, knowledge empowers. But training in the security sector, I feel, is a bit messed up. It's not standardized. The wages are really awful. I think frontline staff don't get the recognition, the pay, the working hours, the security, or around their job that they need to have, and they're not valued enough. And I think that needs to be really looked at by the industry.
Yeah. That
needs to change, because we can't have people doing security as an extra income after doing a daytime job, and then they do 4 or 5 more hours at night to earn extra cash. That is wrong, because you can't function after working 12, 13, 14 hours.
Yeah.
It's wrong that people should be paid minimum wages or less even. It's wrong that people are not, the training is haphazard. People need to check that the training is not just done but understood. And refreshers have to happen. Training is just absolutely a must, and most importantly in the industry, and that goes in with the young people. I think security needs to be the kind of job that people find interesting, rather than just a job like a doorman or supervisor. It's more than that, as you know, and it needs to be turned into a professional progression route that young people want to enter as a good earning potential, and they can go up as high as they want to. And that needs to be provided, and I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Even as a job transition, even if someone transitions into the industry like I have, and I know a lot of other people on our teams have, it's something that needs to appeal to more people. And
Absolutely.
I agree with you there, totally. So when Martyns Law is finalised, what is the next step in your journey?
Yeah, so I get asked that a lot, and it's funny because Nick Aldworth said, because he's working hard on the campaign, when the campaign finishes, he feels he'll have an emotional dip, or crash, he calls it. I don't think I will have that, because I don't see myself completely stopping. Not that I have to continue campaigning, but I'll carry on talking about it, and there's an implementation period of, I think, 18 months. I certainly want to hang around the industry then, because I'd love to see it come to life.
Yes.
I'd like to see the success stories with it. I'd like to see in person the venues that are so much safer. I'd like to see the general public responding positively. So I want to see that happen. Obviously not to the level I am doing now. I'm absolutely exhausted with the busyness I have.
Yeah.
But I'm doing it. I don't say no to anything if I can, because I know the government are watching my social media activities, and I make sure it's all on there, whatever I do.
And this is such a vital time.
Yeah, it's an important time, and I want them to see I'm not going away till it's done. Whoever gets in power, they need to take it serious. So I will be hanging around. I will definitely not do a doctorate, for sure. But yeah, it's it'll slowly ebb off, but not immediately. It'll take a few years.
Oh, it's nice to hear you're going to keep in touch with it and stay involved.
I'm genuinely interested in the industry, and I want people to get it right. I want people to have success. I want companies to actually also, this sounds really weird now, but I want people to profit from Martyns Law, because it's an opportunity.
Yes.
In the future, once it's out, not before, but once it's out, I want people to create new stuff and whatever, and engage with new products, new working habits, whatever, and develop training courses and develop passing on knowledge and whatever, and make money with it. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
That happens with everything, whether it's GDPR or health and safety. New stuff will bring new opportunities.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I want people to thrive from it.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really, really, really lovely of you. To be honest, that's the last of my questions. I was just going to wrap it up by saying, I'm sure most people will agree that obviously you really shouldn't have had the battle that you have. I know you've mentioned that too. Something like this should have been put into place years ago, but we admire your strength and your determination, and we talk about you a lot here. Lee was talking about you in his podcast. Martyn's Law is discussed a lot here, as I've said, and as a company we endeavour to continue doing all that we can, and we'll continue to support you and endorse Martyn's Law in every way possible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for allowing me to do the podcast.
No, thank you for joining us. It's been so lovely. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Bikini Black podcast by Athena Security Solutions. We hope you enjoyed it, and make sure you subscribe on your preferred platform. Don't forget to check out our other social media channels for behind the scenes and exclusive interview clips. See you next time.